Welcome everybody. Thank you for joining Northwest SABR for another virtual meeting. My name is Tip Wanhoff. I have organized this meeting, and before we move into the main event, in which we will hear from Katherine Cheng, the Vice President of People and Culture and Diversity, Equity and Inclusion with the Mariners, we will conduct a little administrative business here with some brief announcements. So I'm going to ask Bob to share announcements that you have, Bob.
Okay, so we have something scheduled. We're just working up for the 9th of June, which is a Friday in Eugene with the Emeralds there. They're having a game focused on Negro League history and the history of the barnstorming in Oregon by Negro Leaguers there. It's also a SABR night that they're offering us reduced admission prices and a special SABR section at the ballpark, so we can all sit together and stuff. And I've sent out some information to the whole group, and I've posted an event on the chapter's Facebook page as well, which I will update as we learn more and things like that. We will have a table in the concourse like we used to have at FanFest stuff. So that'll be good. We can all be together and do stuff there. It's June 9th. I'm not asking people to like buy tickets right now or make a real ironclad commitment, but I would like to get some information as to whether you're going to try to come or not, so that we can work things together with the Emeralds staff to have that. So I hope you do come. I know it's for a lot of the Seattleites, it's a long trip away, but I would be great for you to come and hang out there. And so I'll keep you posted. Let me know, though. I need to give the Emeralds some kind of a vague outline as to how many people are planning on coming to that. So that's June 9th. The game time is 6:35. I'm not sure as how much will be going on beforehand. There is a chance that we could make some presentations or have some kind of a meeting at the ballpark prior to the game. It's all up in the air. So.
And that's a Friday, Bob, correct?
It's Friday, June 9th. Yeah.
Okay. Bob, any other announcements?
Not at this time, I don't think.
Okay.
Well, if you weren't at the previous meeting that we talked about changing the name of the chapter, we pretty much decided to keep it as Pacific Northwest SABR as opposed to something else to specify where we were. There was a lot of chatter that we had at the meeting, which I don't need to go into at this point.
Thanks, Bob. The other announcement that I will make is that on Saturday, May 6th, will be the return to in-person SABR meetings. It's been a couple of years, 3 years plus now since we've met in person for a formal meeting. And so Saturday, May 6th in the afternoon at Seattle Pacific University in the library conference room, our usual meeting space, we will have a traditional meeting with presentations and camaraderie, followed by very likely a visit to some local eatery to continue the baseball conversation. All right, any other announcements, brief announcements before we begin? Seeing none, I will move on. Well, again, thank you all for coming out tonight for our virtual meeting. Again, we welcome Katherine Cheng of the Seattle Mariners. Rather than me trying to introduce her, I will ask Katherine, can you please introduce yourself to us?
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. So yes, I work with the Mariners. I've only been there for about 5 months now. I am in a brand new position that they've created. It's the Vice President of Culture, DEI, and now I'm overseeing recruiting as well. So they've added to my mandate in the last couple of months. So, but yeah, before coming to the Mariners, I was with Expedia Group for almost 11 years, and I have also worked with Microsoft and Starbucks, and also for the government. So I worked for Governor Gary Locke for several years, and also for the federal government. So I've kind of spanned a lot of different areas and different kind of industries, but now I'm with baseball, and it's a great thing. My family is very involved in baseball. My husband's a diehard fan. My kids, I have twin 14-year-old boys who play competitively, and they are very excited for this role. They weren't so excited about any of the other roles before, so.
So, Katherine, what does a vice president of culture do in a big league organization?
Well, it's interesting because for me, I think it's different for everybody who takes on a role like this. Culture is defined differently by different people. I think within the organization, even people probably will name all kinds of things of what they think about what culture is. So I'm helping to try and define what that is for the Mariners. There's a lot of work being done just in terms of, how people feel when they're there working for the organization, how people feel their work actually contributes to the organization and to the team. So there are a lot of different things that actually come into play when people talk about culture. So the way that I see my role is to ensure that that I find out what people think culture is, and then we come and sort of agree upon the core tenets of what culture would be for the Mariners. But in doing so, it's the crux of it is really making sure that we have a definition of what people believe their role to be, sort of that North Star that drives all of us, where it's not about us, it's about the collective effort, it's about the team, it's about the community. So so culture really is how you fit in and how you do your work so that we can deliver the best experience for the fans, and also support the team so that we can have a successful season. Because a lot of people forget that there's a whole front office and all these different functions that are the same types of functions that take place in other organizations and corporations that help to drive and support the actual baseball that happens on the field.
Great. And for those of you who, I guess I should clarify, I've got a few questions that I'm going to lead with here, but there will be time for you to have, to ask questions too. So just to kick things off, I've prepared some questions, and then we will, open it up for others. So Katherine, you've been in your role for 5-6 months and counting. What do you know? Why might an organization like the Mariners create a job like this? Do other organizations in the big leagues or in professional sports have these types of roles? How common is it?
Yeah, it's becoming more common. I have to say that, being in the corporate world, this was something that sort of came about probably more than 10 years ago. For me, this title is new for me. I actually don't care for the title because I feel like when you talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, this should be something that we're looking at in all aspects of the business. And so, sometimes when you have that title, it's sort of seen as, oh, it's the last stop when we do things, if we're in marketing or if we're in in baseball operations or whatever, we have our campaigns or our initiatives and we have to stop. The last stop is checking it through DEI to make sure that we're checking the boxes, and I can't stand that. So so to me, it's really critical, and all the work I've done in the past. My background is in government, social impact, and sustainability, and community. So all of that work has been done looking through the lens of DEI. So to me, it was sort of like, why do we need to have DEI called out? But it's important because a lot of organizations don't even know what that really means. And it's important to have that guide. So I think for organizations like the Mariners and particularly sports teams, what people don't realize is that it's not just about internal, it's also external. So, everything that an organization does and stands for is reflected outwardly. And so, whether you have employees who really care about it or fans, I mean, it makes a difference. There are a lot of different things that happen. And if you don't think about all those areas, then it can be detrimental to the organization, I think. And of course, some of you may think, well, it hasn't happened in years, but then we kind of look back and you can kind of pull apart, some of the areas as to why maybe, why did we have a Negro Leagues in the first place, right? So there are just a lot of things like that where you start to think about how it makes sense. It's all about making people feel like they belong. People talk about baseball being America's pastime, and it is America's pastime, but America also looks different these days, and we have to be able to diversify the fan base and all of the things that go into baseball, not just the players, but the stadium, the types of food and the concessions, all of those things. Because if we don't do that, baseball will not live, sports will not live, because your fan base is reflective of the community. And so, so when you talk about, why would a sports team have a DEI role? It is twofold. It's internal as well as external, because again, your reputation is almost everything. You spend years building up a reputation and it can be taken down in 1 second. So it's really critical to really understand how people look at an organization and what it is that you stand for as an organization.
Interesting. So the media release that announced your hire says that you're going to be tasked with, quote, seeking new, improved, and innovative ways to cultivate the Seattle Mariners culture, lead internal and external DEI efforts, and DEI is diversity, equity, and inclusion, and more. So as of March 14th, 2023, how would you describe the current Seattle Mariners culture? What do you, I mean, you came in 6 months ago. What have you observed, and how has maybe that changed in the past 6 or 7 months? Or maybe what did you think before you started the job, with the Mariners' reputation in the corporate community?
Well, I mean, I read the news, so I I definitely know some of the history and baggage that this organization and baseball in general has carried, and sports in general. So I knew it was going to be somewhat of a challenge, and I'm always up for a challenge. But I also knew that there is, again, the definitions of culture, right? There's different types of definitions, and it's not fair because I came in during a winning season, and it was a pretty spectacular ending there that I came in on. So it's very different because it's hard to gauge culture than when you're on a high, right? Like there's definitely with sports, it's the highs and lows, and what I'm trying to seek to do is not to say that, I'm going to come in and change everything, because it's not like everything is bad. You have to really be open to listening and learning what things are already in place, because it's not about coming in and saying, oh, everything's bad and we're going to get rid of all of this. That's not the point of, I think, this position and the role that I take. And it's really important for I think people in my type of role to acknowledge the good things that have taken place, while also having the reminder of things that maybe were not so great before, just so that history doesn't repeat itself. And this is the case with anything that I think you do, not just in a role like this. But ultimately, it's really, again, making sure that that the people who work there feel like they belong there, that they are making positive contributions, and that they'll, because in a down year, like in the good years when we're doing well, it's an awesome feeling, but that's carried by the momentum of the community. It's the winning nature, but you still have to be there if you're not winning, and you still have to do the work with the same enthusiasm and all of the same type of the not passion, but the commitment to doing great work. So for me, the challenge really is kind of trying to define that, because ultimately we're one team and all the pieces in the team work together. And if one area is not so happy or doesn't feel like the culture piece is there, it can shift the balance. It can change it can really change kind of the makeup of everything. And I'm sure that many of you have been in places where there might be a little bit of a toxic environment and just one area tanks the whole thing. So it's really about finding that balance and listening a lot. This first year is about listening, because if you don't listen and you don't hear what people are saying and you just think then you won't be able to make changes that are actually going to be long lasting.
So, I mean, you said you're going to spend your first year, probably more than 1 year, doing a lot of listening. And that will maybe inform kind of how you proceed. But is there a blueprint that people who do your type of work, or leaders in your type of position, how do you improve a big league organization's culture to make it more diverse, equitable, and inclusive? Like, is it, I mean, we all see the on-field product, right? Like we watch a ball game. We know that last year, for example, Tampa Bay Rays had 5 players who refused to wear the LGBT patch on their jersey. And they said they just didn't agree with the lifestyle. How does an organization convey to its employees that what it means, what DEI can mean, and how you can convey that more broadly in the community? And can you speak to that?
Yeah, so while I say that the first year is about listening, it doesn't mean that there's no action being taken. So there are definitely things, for me, when I started, I met with all the leaders and I said, look, I'm going to be in all of your business, not in a way that's threatening, not in a way that's coming and saying, I'm going to make changes, because I shouldn't have the authority to do that, but to be open to me coming in and observing and listening to how you're doing things, how you feel about things. Because for me, you may not know that there are things that you can do. Like I said before, every area of the organization should have this lens that they're looking through. And sometimes they don't really know what that means. So for instance, I'm working with concessions. I'm looking at, the types of foods that we have, the types of vendors that we're using, using diverse vendors, and opening people's minds to different types of foods. There's also, in terms of the marketing and the game day experience, what can we do to make it so that people who are from different backgrounds can feel like they are part of this. As I said before, America's pastime, America looks different now. We need to make sure that we because we're trying to expand the game, we have to. It's also business imperative. So for me, the job that I'm doing, I always look at all of my work in every organization that I worked in, maybe except for government. I always look through it with, it's a business, and ultimately you have to, it has to be successful for the bottom line. Otherwise it won't support these other areas. So in terms of what the organization stands for, I think that what we seek to do is, not everybody's going to agree with all of the policies. I think that there are a lot of times when you talk about wearing the LGBTQ patch or things like that, ultimately how an organization shows up, it's very important in terms of the values, right? Because the values that they espouse are the values that people will see and feel like I can go to your house and feel comfortable, right? Players are, it is tricky with players, because I have not had any interaction so far with players and haven't had any kind of instances like that. But what I would do in that case is I would have a conversation with the organization, because ultimately we have to understand, what do we stand for? What are we willing to stand for? I understand that there are a lot of times when business needs take over. And I'm not saying that this is the case, because I haven't had these situations yet, but this is the kind of discussion that I had when I was being hired on, is how would I deal with that? Well, to me, it's all about how are you wanting to show up? And as long as we are not doing something to harm others, then and only doing things to make sure that we are supportive and you know, there are certain, like I said, how do I answer this? So if you look at an organization like the Storm, they have a very distinct mandate. They can do things because there's a certain, their audience is very much, you know, supportive of that. They have built their brand to support certain issues, and so they speak out a lot. We're not in the same position because, like I said, it's ultimately a business. So, but that doesn't mean that I wouldn't push back and and say my opinion and fight for certain things, not based on what I believe, because I believe a lot of things, but based on what the business is, the environment in which we are, in which we exist, which is in a more progressive area, but also in terms of who our fans are. What are our fans telling us? What are our employees telling us? Ultimately, our employees and our fans have to feel safe and supported, and understand where we do stand. Because I think the tricky thing is when organizations say one thing or don't say anything at all and don't follow that, that's when you get in trouble. But if you define what you stand for and you stick with it and you have the reasoning behind it, I think that you will always be okay. But if you kind of don't have any opinion either, then that's, you know, people have no idea where you stand. So it's a long-winded answer and it's complicated and it's hard to answer that without having a more specific example that I'm dealing with this organization. But I can just say that, you know, these are discussions that are to be had. And for me in this role, as long as it's an environment where I can come and make my case, and whatever decision is determined, I have to be okay with it if I've been able to actually make my case and to understand that, you know, there are other factors that come into play. Just because there's a DEI person at an organization doesn't mean that you're going to all of a sudden be speaking out and supporting all these different causes, because as we know, people have a lot of opinions out there and they don't agree on a lot of things. But I think also, you know, I have to say that sports is one area where it's pretty fascinating, especially in the last few years, that we've seen this very big divide politically, at least, that touches on some of these topics. And sports is the one place where you can be in a stadium, sitting next to somebody and cheering and high-fiving and even hugging them when you would never think that you would even want to talk to them, if you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because sports has that ability to bring people together. So to me, if we can use sports to help open up hearts and minds, I don't care what you believe in, but if we can use that as a place where we can find common ground, then, you know, that's a great thing.
Great. Well, I'm going to ask one more kind of question here, and then we'll spend the next several minutes fielding questions from the audience. So, Katherine, the last question I have for you prepared is, what are the greatest challenges that you see from your vantage point right now to improve or shape the Seattle Mariners organizational culture and make it more inclusive?
So I think that the challenge right now, as I said before, is that, you know, when you're kind of on that upswing, there's almost and I'm not saying it is the case, that I'm doing a survey and kind of trying to ask a lot of questions and having a lot of conversations with people, but what can happen is that you do have a false sense of what the culture is. And I feel like, you know, it's a lot of positive energy, which is great, but that can be misconstrued as culture when it's really more excitement for the team. And the reason that I call that out is because then some of the things that might be suggested almost may not seem to be needed, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? Like if you're trying to make some changes so that there is a more this kind of culture or more that kind of culture, but everyone's like, well, culture is great right now, you know, because the season's great. So then it becomes a challenge, because for me to do my work, you know, I want to be able to show that there's movement. So so sometimes I think that, you know, we're also the cadence of the season, we're full into it right now, you know, getting ready for opening day. And so people are moving so quickly. So sometimes, you know, trying to lay on something, they're like, oh, here, you know, here comes Catherine. We're so swamped and you're gonna ask this, you know. So, and they've been really good about it though, because I think that again, it's all in the way that you view it. You know, when we're talking about the different areas of the business, they don't think necessarily about, it's not that they don't want to, they just don't have time and they haven't in the past. Think about how can you extend what your area is doing to include X, Y, and Z. And so it's kind of that, oh, okay, well, we didn't know that. And so now being invited to a lot of different meetings, being a part of a lot of discussions early on, it is quite a load. So that's the other challenge, is that there's not enough time in the day.
Great. Well, thank you for fielding my series of questions here. I want to open it up. If anybody else wants to ask anything of Catherine, now is a great time.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and go first to pitch my organization. Rick Solomon and I are both board members of the Buffalo Soldier Museum of Tacoma. And we are working on, this is African American military history. But they had a great impact on baseball, and I won't bore you with a bunch of stuff, but one of the things we would like to do is partner with the Mariners, as we are working on putting a museum in Seattle up at Fort Lawton. If you haven't been up there, it's and building. We have done a calendar. We just had 3 editions. We sold out all of them. We did 500 last year. We did bring out a guy from the Negro League Museum, Phil Dixon, and we would like to participate with you during All-Star Week or any other time that we can help bring in our connection to the African American and the military community, especially in Pierce County. And we are also connected in the, you know, I'm a member of the Heritage Caucus of the state of Washington. You may be familiar with that. And so we're trying to advance, yes, our museum, but one of our interests, kind of our, I guess, insanities is our interest in, because so many African American soldiers played Negro League baseball, and they also played in Hawaii, which was probably the most diverse baseball climate in the world in 1910 to 1920, because it had more Asian teams than it did and this was the one African American team, than probably any other place in the country. And they also had teams in Japan and China. And so I've run across all this in my research. And so I'd be glad to team up with you and give you our support. And you can reach us through SABR or the Buffalo Soldier Museum of Tacoma. It's on the internet. Rick's on the board. And anyway, we're looking forward to working with you. That's the sales pitch.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that. So for All-Star Week, I have to tell you that that we actually don't own anything for All-Star Week. It's all MLB. They're renting our space. However, I am working with them on several DEI initiatives, and one of them is that they are bringing a Negro Leagues. It's a traveling exhibit that they usually have at all the All-Star games. In addition to the, there's JACL, the Japanese American Citizens League, has a Japanese American baseball, and I don't know if this one's focusing on that, but I'm looking at doing a focus on the Japanese incarceration, because a lot of teams actually were born out of that, a very, very competitive teams. So I think that there's definitely opportunity. Plus, we could talk about how to activate that during the games. So the African American History Month, that was in February, so we never get to do it during the season, but we have celebrations at the stadium. We did this last year as well, and or I'm sorry, I just started it this last year. So we will have that moving forward, and it'd be great to share that with employees in the future as well. but we should talk because there are probably other opportunities. What I'm looking for is how to activate exactly these types of things during regular game days. We have these celebration months, but the celebratory months shouldn't just happen just during those months. I mean, I always tell people, well, I'm not just Asian American during the month of May. So, other people who are of different, whatever, it shouldn't only be celebrated during those months. So we'll be looking at opportunities to bring that to the forefront, but also I want to look at doing some speaker series. We have an initiative to bring people to the ballpark earlier and stay later. And so one of the things that I'd like to do is utilize the time to educate people that might come to the ballpark earlier. So that would be a great opportunity to maybe do a panel discussion about the Buffalo Soldiers or something like that. But also when we're celebrating veterans.
The very first African-American veteran who was in the Civil War, who played semi-professional baseball, was Charles Douglas, the son of Frederick Douglass.
Oh my gosh.
He's going to be a focus of our first calendar, and I'm working with the Anacostia Museum in Washington, D.C. to maybe bring an exhibit. We would like to talk to them about bringing an exhibit out here, tying Frederick Douglass to baseball. And you don't get any better in American diversity history than that.
That's great. We will connect for sure.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
If I could jump in, I actually had a question. Hi, Catherine. My name is Amanda. My question is, from my understanding, I think the Seattle Seahawks have had a DEI department since I think 2020. And I'm just curious what you've done, or maybe what you have taken from or collaborated with the Seattle Seahawks at all with DEI.
That's funny. That's Karen Wilkins-Mickey. She's one of my very good friends. She's the one who told me that I should go for this job when I said, no, I don't do DEI. So she's amazing. And yes, I actually have a partnership. So I know all the people that do all this work at the Kraken, at the Storm, at the Sounders, and especially at the Seahawks. I've worked with them for many years. Karen and I, who is the head of DEI at the Seahawks, she and I worked together for years at Expedia Group, and I did social impact and sustainability work, and she did the DEI work. So, but again, it was all so intertwined. So, but yeah, there's definitely, to me, individual teams can have their own initiatives, but I think we're so much stronger together to do things, more collectively. So we are looking at we have been collaborating, and we will be collaborating more for different initiatives, because again, so many, and this is the problem with, and I'm not talking about in the sports world, I'm just talking about in general, when different organizations, they want to do their own thing, they want to get their own kudos, and it's always frustrated me in the corporate world, because when you can collectively do it, you just make such a much bigger impact. So luckily, all the representatives at the sports teams that I've been working with for years, they're all good friends. We've been collaborating for years, and so we intend to continue that. Thank you for that question.
Thank you.
Catherine, I'm wondering if you saw the editorial that was in the Washington Post a couple weeks ago by a guy named Kevin Blackstone, that said that the point of it was, it said baseball needs to address its problem with Florida and diversity there, given that we have like people like yourself that have a job title that says diversity and inclusion, and that half of the spring training games that take place in Major League Baseball now take place in a state where diversity and inclusion are dirty words, and the government is working against them. Now, I know that they can't just pick up stakes and move like they did 50 years ago, and people moved to Arizona. But there's a lot of this is a big can of worms, basically. There's a lot of people of color that work in Major League Baseball, both on the teams and stuff like that. There's bound to be some blowback there. You see the other teams that kind of work together to expand and diverse and to speak out against, like Black Lives Matter and things like that. That's going to be a real problem, I think. And I don't know expect you to snap your fingers and say, well, here's what we should do. If you haven't read that editorial, I posted it on the chapter's Facebook page there, and I recommend everyone to read it.
Oh, Bob, this is where I have to have my disclaimer. Everything I say to you here is it's about me, and if I'm of course I do this work for the Mariners, but like I said before, when I do the work for the Mariners, I have to make sure that I am being a diligent steward of the Mariners and not only pressing my own opinions for my opinion's sake. So what I'm about to say now is my personal feeling, and it's something that, like, I can't sit still because I'm sort of, as you're saying this, it's agitating. That all the things that are happening is agitating to me. And if it were up to me, there would be a lot of things that would be done. It's a business, though. It's a huge business that unfortunately is very much rooted in that state. And it's not just that state, it's happening everywhere. It's actually we're going to see this everywhere, unfortunately. So I'm taking a deep breath here. So I don't even know how to put this without, I got to be careful. I think that this is one of those instances, though, because it is in a state where, it's like Arizona or Florida, right? Like that's where spring training takes place. It's not something that me saying anything would ever be able to change. This is something where it really takes the community. And I hate to say this, but in the past, we've had a lot, especially the last several years, people can vote with their pocketbooks, right? Well, now it's not pocketbook, that's dating me. People can vote with their phones, right? They can vote by not going to these places. They can boycott. Remember when oh gosh, what state was it? Oh my gosh, I'm totally blanking here. Where was the NCAA?
Georgia.
Was it Georgia? And they boycotted, and all that. That's not common. That can happen if there's an instance that takes place, right, one time, but we're talking about kind of an institution. So, but in my opinion, people can vote by not traveling there. I don't want to travel there because a lot of reasons now, but I don't want to spend my money there. I don't want, but I have to say, if you look at even things like the Olympics or the World Cup that just took place, and all of the things that were happening there, people still went and spent their money. They still went because it was like all the things that are so in your face, they didn't matter because people, so it's such an, it's, I'm sorry, I'm being so inarticulate here because I can't say exactly what I want to, but what I'm trying to convey is that it's up to the people to do things and do it consistently, while also understanding that it's impacting the things that they love. They love to watch, they love the competition, they love the play. You know what I mean? Like, it's tricky. If it were up to me, of course, I would have more. There would be a lot of different things that I would say, but yeah, I don't even know what to say, Bob. I'm sorry. I hope I feel very strongly about it. And if I wasn't in a public forum here, you would hear a lot of profanities and a lot of opinions. And yeah, that's not something that I think that that can be changed easily, even when you have a lot of people who might disagree with that. But then also think about this in the state of Florida, and not just in the state of Florida, but where that is happening the most. A lot of people believe it. A lot of people are cheering the governor on. A lot of people are, so it's not just that, we think it's wrong. Some people think it's right. So yeah, I don't know. I'm sorry. I didn't give you a good answer.
Catherine, I'm going to go to the chat box here, and Mark Armour posted a question. He says, you mentioned the storm earlier. Does Mariner ownership and Mariner management believe or understand that their city is more sensitive to these issues, more proud of their diversity than many other places?
Absolutely. And you know, I would not have come to this organization, no matter how much I love the Mariners and how much I love baseball, if I did not think that the owners and the leadership were really committed to it. Because there's nothing more frustrating than going and taking a job where they might say something and give you a title and then don't actually back it up and don't give you the support. So in my interview process, I asked that multiple times and multiple ways so that I felt comfortable that that I would have the support to do the work that I needed to do.
Thank you. All right, Mike, your hand is up.
Thanks for calling on me. I just, while we're pitching organizations, I'm a local chapter co-lead for an organization called the Foundation Against Intolerance and Racism. And we have a couple of fairly famous board members on our board of advisors and trustees. One is Barry Weiss, the famous Jewish writer. Another is John McWhorter. But we promote color blindness and gender blindness, and just ignoring color and gender as much as you possibly can, and treat everybody equally, and using old-fashioned equal opportunity, and to promote people based on meritocracy. And I'd like to know what Katherine thinks about that sort of concept, that color blindness, gender blindness, meritocracy, and old-fashioned equal opportunity.
So Mike, you may not want to hear this, but I don't believe in that. Because if you look at just me, for instance, you actually can't be, there's no gender blind or color blind. And that's the case with so many people of color and women. So, and as much as people would like to say that they are gender blind and colorblind, it's not possible. And it also, the other thing is that it actually then diminishes the fact that we do come from different backgrounds and have these experiences. So I think that I would be careful about talking about gender blindness and color blindness, because it really isn't possible. And instead, I think that, you know, I think the work that you're seeking to do is the right thing in trying to, you know, seeking to base things on meritocracy and equality. It's very difficult. I'm going to tell you right now, people, every single person has a bias. And no matter how much people say that they're not biased, every single person has a bias because of the way they grew up, where they grew up, what they were taught, what they are surrounded by. There's no way that anybody can say that they are not biased. And so the tricky piece is that we don't even know sometimes what our biases are. Even the most progressive people have biases. And sometimes it's too far the other way, to be honest. And it can be dangerous.
That's true. That's true.
And so in order to do this work for me, I try not to use those terms. I try not to say that, you know, oh, if we take anti-bias training, we're good. If we, you know, because nobody can take away the things that they grew up learning. These were everything that who we are today is based on what we learned from growing up, the experiences that we've had, and we can all only seek to be better. So there are a lot of people who are racist and they really try hard not to be. I appreciate that. What I don't appreciate is if somebody says, I'm not racist. I mean, and people might not be racist, but it's not about that. You know what I mean? Like, people focus too much on the terms and not on doing the work. I think that this is one of the tricky pieces that I have in doing this work also is, and the reason that I've been asked to take on recruiting is because I was asking a lot of questions of how we're recruiting, what the policy is. And a lot of teams that had job openings, I think, you know, when I talked to them, what I kind of got from them, and I would say to them at the end is, are you worried that I'm gonna dictate who you hire and say that you have to hire someone who's who's not a white male? And they would kind of go, sort of. And I say, then you've got my job all wrong. That is not what I'm here to do. You can hire white male. That's not what I'm here to restrict. What I'm trying to do is make sure that the pool of candidates that you have is more diverse and more reflective of the community and reflective of different experiences and different types of backgrounds. But ultimately, we want the best qualified person that came out of that pool. And if it is a white male, I'm fine with that.
No, okay.
I just need to be able
Well,
to see that. I just need to see the back. But do you see, this is why it's dangerous to have, like, this is why I said before, I don't want DEI in my title, because sometimes people think that if you're DEI, you're just going to be there to, you know, oh, it's all about white guilt. It's all about, you know, that's not what it's about, because we all have experience. And it's not even just about the cultural diversity and gender diversity. It's about economic diversity. I mean, to be equitable, we have to look at all those things, right? And so I think that, you know, in terms of putting labels on, that's the hard part, because we're all imperfect, and we can all only seek to do better and be better.
but do you think equality and equal opportunity and meritocracy are bad things?
No, I don't think those are bad things, but I also think that equality and equity are different things.
Well, that's true. That's true. I mean, but
having
equity
the opportunity,
equity can be, and a lot of people interpret equity to be favoring one group over another simply because of their color, their gender, their sexual preference, whatever. And equal opportunity is saying, okay, we're gonna promote, or we're gonna hire the most qualified person, irregardless of color. Didn't you just say that if you and I were competing for a job, you're an Asian female, I'm a white male, and if you happen to be more qualified than I am, you should get the job. But if the reverse was true, if I'm more qualified than you, don't you agree that I should get the job?
Yeah, that's what I just said. But
Right.
the difference also is looking at what are you saying are the qualifications for the job, though. That's the other piece.
Well,
so what I'm looking
they are
at
what they
is
are.
if there are certain, not always, because there are qualifications, but then there's also there are biases in the way that we do qualifications. Like, certain things might be required, and if you think about what might be required, what does it mean for you to have those required skills? It could actually come down to then how you had access to them, whether you did have access to them. So there are so many different factors. There's no way to answer. Like, I can't just answer that question and say, yes, that's the truth, or
No,
that's
I
not the truth.
understand that.
It's taking all of
that.
the point of the work is to take it all into consideration, but also to be looking at what is the makeup of your team in general. Because if you don't have a team that looks different, you're not going to get the best of thinking in terms of how you're going to deliver to the audiences that you're supposed to be delivering to. So there's nothing that is set in stone. It's about making sure that when there is opportunity, it's given to everybody, but that also the opportunity that it's given to everybody is there are systemic things that have come into play in how people get to that equal opportunity as well. So, I mean, we could go on and on this.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of how you look at what it means to have a more diverse pool, and what it is that you want your organization to be made up of. And absolutely, you want the most qualified people, but it's not just about the qualifications.
Thanks, Mike. We're gonna move on to Josh. Josh, you have a question. Your hand is up.
Hi. Yeah. Hey, thank you. I'm Josh Burstein in Eugene. And Katherine, thank you for being here. And I just want to say that I think one reason I find your presentation so interesting is because you are in a very difficult spot, as you yourself have noted with some of these answers. And what I really appreciate it and I'm a history geek, so I kind of look at history and that kind of thing. I think it was Adam Clayton Powell Jr., who was a congressman from New York in the 60s or 70s, who in that time frame said, it's not black power, it's not white power, it's green power, meaning money. And if you look at businesses, and of course you work now for a private business, right? And I've worked for private and public. I now work for the government here in Eugene. But where I'm going with this is your point about I don't want to put words in your mouth. You don't represent the Mariners completely. You can't make that final decision on things, but your role, the fact that they would hire you in that role, I think is very telling for those of us who support DEI and DEIB and things like that. And I guess the question I have is, we've heard a lot more in recent years, particularly after George Floyd in 2020, about the business case for diversity. And it's not just economics, but, and you made a point about that earlier too, to diverse the fan base. I mean, businesses want to make money. I don't think they're going to care if they sell tickets to, this person or that person, this person's background or whatever it is. We have seen, at least since 2020, and I don't know if it's softening a little bit, but private companies that are being a little bit more forward and open in some of what they've said and done. And some of it's based here in the Pacific Northwest, because we're maybe in some parts more progressive. You're looking at like Starbucks, although not on the union side, but Starbucks and Microsoft and some of the tech companies, and you look at some of the other places. And if you look at, and you referenced Florida earlier, if you look at Disney in Florida, that's a whole other story. The question I guess I have is who is or maybe I'll phrase it different, who is the Mariners client here, so to speak, right? Is it, we're a business, we want to make sure our employees are feeling connected and supported DEI wise? Is it our players? Because those are the people who people see on the field. They don't see the hundreds of other folks doing all the stuff that you're doing behind the scenes. Or is it the fans? Because that's where our money comes from. And I'm just wondering, kind of, if you look again at the business case for diversity, how can you move that ball forward, so to speak? And I totally can respect what you've said before about there's some things you can't answer certain ways, and so I don't want to put you in a harder spot, but just kind of pick up on a little bit of that thread that has come up from before. I'd appreciate that.
Yeah, no, thank you for that question. I view our audience, our clients, whatever you want to call them, as all of those, because you cannot separate that. Your employees are fans, our community, the community are fans and potential, you know what I mean? Like and that's the same thing that's the same lens that I viewed it from when I was in corporate, because I think that too many times people think, oh, well, you do one thing for the employees and you don't have the same values for, external, but your employees are ultimately also your fans and, all of that. But I think also, with all the different areas and how they work together, and this is why I was talking about that one team, everybody has a role to play. I think that if you recall, Tip, you sent me several articles, and one of them, the one about the, oh gosh, I forgot I don't even remember the player's name, but
Steve Clevenger, the former backup catcher for the Mariners about 7-8 years ago.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's as good of an example as any in terms of how close you can get to impacting how the player side or that type of thing. I mean, first of all, it's just not a smart move to be on social media and say anything like that. I mean, that it's just ridiculous, because people see who you are and people care. There are a lot of players who've said very, stupid things in public, and they might recover, but there are certain things in certain times that it just isn't, the wrong time, wrong place, right? And that's why I was saying that, a lot of times people will say things and they might have different feelings. So sometimes I don't even trust, like, if somebody says, oh, well, I'm super progressive, all this. That's why I think that you have to really look at the organization and the work that I do. Nobody's going to come and tell me that they don't believe in something that I do because of a reason that is totally not PC these days, but they might tell me something and use other excuses as to why they don't believe in what I'm doing. And then I can kind of read between the lines and go, okay, actually it's exactly, the other thing. Right. But ultimately, to me, I don't even care about that so much. I care that that we as an organization, because ultimately when the organization, when the current owners are gone, when this management team is gone, when the players are gone and a new crop comes in, the organization has to stand for something. The organization has a brand. The organization, that I think that in the past, the organizations have been, the brands have been led by people. And of course, players will have different, will carry the brand, but that's a different story, right? That's in terms of their performance and stuff. And, some of their superstar kind of personas. But ultimately in this type of work, I think that most people understand that, and especially we have it's not as diverse as I think we would like these days in MLB, at least for Black American players, but it's a more diverse group, and if you don't stand for things, and if you don't speak out on things that could potentially be harmful to people within your organization, you weaken your organization. You weaken the trust. You weaken their ability to want to perform well. You lose good people.
All right, Catherine, we're down to our last couple of minutes here. We have one more hand up in our audience here. Max Gordon with the final question. Please proceed.
Hey, how's it going? My name is Max. I'm a college student down at the University of Oregon, but I'm from Seattle area. Grew up going to Mariner games, love the Mariners. And one day, hopefully getting into baseball ops. And so I find your presentation super interesting. I want to go back to something that you said earlier. And it kind of reminded me of like, how do you or the Mariners go about towing the line between like, you mentioned that like when you go to a baseball game, it's like everyone together, no matter your beliefs, everyone is there, celebrate the game. I guess my question is, how do you go about towing the line between like making the game about the game and bringing people together while also standing up for something that's right?
Well, I think that, the game is the game, but I think that there are things that, for instance, I don't know if you saw when there were some terrible shootings. We've had a lot of shootings, right? And the Mariners did speak out against it, and so did other teams. But other teams have spoken about, against other things. And one thing that I had talked to the leadership, because it was before I came on board, but I said to them, it's one thing to speak out on an issue, but we also have to follow through. Like, it's not good enough just to say, oh, our hearts go out to, these people or whatever for these tragedies. If we're going to speak out, we have to speak out. We have to have a stance, right? So right or wrong, to me, an organization, it is about the game, right? That's ultimately what it's about. But because the game and sports in general has the ability, again, like I said, to bring people together, there also is, and they're in the community. So if you think about things like the sponsorships, the type of food that they bring in, let's take, for example, an organization like a Chick-fil-A, or that have very specific things that they say and do. Those are sort of the peripheral ways that it impacts the game. And because it is about money a lot of times, right? Sponsorship pays for a lot of things. And so it's almost impossible to separate it completely. But this is why it's such a difficult line to balance here. But also, you kind of just know sometimes if it's right or not. You know what I mean? Like there are some things that you can just say, okay, maybe we don't step into this, but other things, then you just kind of say, it's wrong that we don't. So I don't know how to exactly express that, but I'm sure that you can take a guess at some at certain things that would happen. And so again, when we're celebrating things, we use the opportunity to celebrate like different heritage nights, also Pride Night, and different things like that, to show the support that we have of diverse groups. But ultimately, like you said, it is a game, and so there's this cyclical nature to it. But we also have an industry where you know that there have to be gay players that are not safe and do not feel safe enough to come out. You know what I mean? And that's just one example. But I mean, imagine, thinking about back to the Negro Leagues and why the Negro Leagues existed. And then when Jackie Robinson first came up, and, when Black players first came in, the abuse that they took, So Bill Russell was, when he passed away, he was living in the Seattle area. And I was lucky enough to spend some time with him because he was friends with several friends, and the stories that he would tell about Boston and being on that team and the abuse he took and traveling with the team. And of course, this is years ago, but all of that trauma, it's the strange thing is that, not the strange thing, it's actually really kind of disgusting, is that kind of behavior still happens. Maybe not to the extent, because there are some laws that are in place for that. And that's just against Black players, but there are Asian players who get taunted. When I was growing up here in Bellevue, I hate Bellevue because of my memories of things that happened there. And right or wrong, that's not fair. But you grow, you remember these things. These are traumatic things. And so it translates into the ballpark. It translates into how you view the game. You know what I mean? Like, all these things are connected. So it's hard to disconnect it from just baseball, because that there are a lot of players that don't speak English, and when fans are even your own fans, not just the other team's fans, they can be brutal, but even your own fans, when things are not going our way, guess what happens? They get ripped and even worse now, on social media. People get ugly, and when they get ugly, they go to the most what's the word, like the raw kind of places, and things like racism come out even against their own players, right? So I think that, just dropped my earbud. So this is why this work is so important, because you never know where it's coming in. I mean, I remember, with food, people say, why are you trying to impact the food options there? And they said there already are ethnic options there. And I said, yes, but are they affordable for fans that might not be as wealthy to be able to go and get $20 meal or whatever, right? And so these things all happen because those all impact how you feel accepted, how you feel a part of everything. So it's every aspect. So I'm sorry, that was really a long way to answer that, but I feel like there's no way that you can separate it. I feel like this work is so important that it has to impact every piece, because whether you're talking about players, fans, or the community, everybody has a different story and everyone has a different experience. And we just have to be open to all of that if we're going to be successful in growing the game, both from a player's perspective as well as from a fan perspective.
Thank you.
Katherine, thank you so much for joining us tonight. You've given us a lot to think about. I know that SABR as an organization is trying to look at itself in ways we can improve our own operations and even in our own chapter. So you've given us lots of things to think about. Thank you for taking as part of your evening to join us here, as I'm sure things are ramping up on your end. I'm sure it's been full speed ahead since you started, but thank you. And thank you to everyone who came out tonight to engage in this conversation. I hope you leave it as thought-provoked as I will. And thank you, and we'll see you next time. Katherine, if you ever want to join us again, just let us know. We'd love to have you back.
Thank you for having me. Thank you, everybody.
Right.
Bravo.
See you, everybody.